Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tech with Peter. Today, on this episode of Web Performance, CDN, and Caching, I'm joined by Rob. Hello, Rob.
Hey, Peter, thank you so much for having me.
Rob is based in Canada and he's a software developer, but I think now he's focused on his business on Onyx.io with a mission to help less technical web developers achieve fast, reliable website by finding and fixing common issues. And I think he's also worked in the past with huge domain registrars and web host companies in Canada. So he has a lot of experience, like over 25 years building website, hosting, and tweaking performance. And it might be like a coincidence with the topic for today, which is web performance for everyone, because his company is also focused on helping less technical people on web performance. So, welcome, Rob.
Oh, awesome. Awesome, Peter. Great introduction. 25 years experience, lots of gray starting in this beard.
I don't have a lot, not up to 25, a bit over a decade, but I'm losing some hair. So,
Oh, I got that problem too, hence the hat. But lots of experience and wisdom to share then.
yeah, with wisdom comes lots of hair.
Yeah, it's exactly it. It's exactly it. So Peter, we were chatting just before we got on the stream, and you know, you're saying you had a really busy week and you're a little tired, and I'm in Canada where winter is already beginning, so I already have a cold. So
Yeah,
let's bring the energy today, all right? Only an hour to go.
yeah. I have my water induced dopamine.
Yeah, same in my Beatles mug.
Yeah. Oh, maybe I should have gotten a fancy mug.
Yeah,
Okay.
awesome.
So,
Awesome, Peter. So maybe what I'll do is I'll take you through a little uh we prepared a little outline for some things we could talk about today and take it from there.
yeah, that's fine.
Awesome. So thank you for the warm introduction. I'm Rob. Everybody, nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Um, so when Peter first invited me to come on his podcast, I was a little bit worried because I checked out all the previous episodes, and he has had some fantastic technical people talk about some really in-depth web performance issues, which is awesome. There's a ton of great content there, Peter, and you turned a little red when I told you that before on the pre-stream. And even though I'm a computer scientist and an engineer my whole life, I was like, I'm not going to add value on those topics. You've had people here writing CDNs and
Yeah,
writing internet protocols and with tons of experience in the web performance space. So
yeah, but
awesome.
I believe everyone has something to add from their perspective.
Well, I hope so. So So I thought maybe what we could do is frame today as being a little bit less technical of a conversation and a little bit more what are some of the human challenges
Yeah,
around website and website performance? Um, because lots of non-technical people or non-professional web developers are building websites and maintaining websites and operating websites, and that's kind of the area I've served in my experience, and I just see a ton of common problems. But those problems aren't nearly as technical advanced as you need to switch protocols, right? These are basic baseline stuff. In fact, so baseline and so easy to us professionals, it'll seem just so obvious. Some of the fixes, but there's some challenges along the way. So I thought maybe what we could do is I'd start by telling you a little bit about my background and my journey, what brings me here, what shades my vantage point, and then that kind of leads us into ONIC and ONIC's mission of helping non-web professionals make awesome, high-performing websites. I thought we could talk through a couple customer stories. I mean, I'm really early in this journey. ONIC is a very new company,
yeah,
but already we have some interesting customer stories, which just highlight some of the challenges that we face along the way, trying to help customers improve their performance, reliability, quality, and then through that there should be some discussion. So as I said, I'm new in this journey. Peter, like, you're an expert in this too. By all means, we could just have a dialogue and kind of take the conversation wherever it goes. And if there's time at the end, I will I'll share maybe some of the top issues I see in some of the websites we analyze, and we can go through maybe some of the fixes. But as I said, I imagine to this audience, a technical web professional kind of audience,
Yeah,
all those are going to seem obvious, but maybe valuable to go through nonetheless.
yeah, that's fine. So take us through. Let's see.
Awesome.
Uh, so do you want to start off with a point, or do you want me to go ahead with my questions?
Maybe I'll start with just a little bit of my background. It sets the framing a little bit.
Okay.
You gave a wonderful introduction off the top, but I studied computer science and am a software engineer. I spent the first part of my career uh, building software and have used every framework along the way. Man, we started off when Java was new and cool. Like, that's the time frame I'm in, and did .NET and PHP and cold fusion back in the day and ASP, and I've seen all of these technologies over the years. And what I'll say from that is, performance is not a new problem in that respect. A lot of the modern frameworks and modern technologies uh, shed a new light
Yeah.
on performance, and certainly we're taking it further than we ever have before. But in my experience, I've just gained, this is a reoccurring story: performance and monitoring, and consistent improvement in quality and these kinds of things, even on those stacks that modern developers would kind of shudder at today. If
Yeah.
you're a bit more of a Next React fan, totally cool. But I've seen a lot over those years, and I have, as a developer, like a full stack kind of experience. I've worked a lot in the cloud. I've worked a lot at the edge. I've worked a lot on software, both front end and back end, but albeit a little earlier in my career. Um, I went on to lead a web agency in the late 2000s, which was a really interesting experience in seeing how web agencies work. And this was at a time when everyone was building WordPress websites.
Yeah.
I don't know if you follow the news, but
Yeah.
WordPress is in a little drama going on over there these days.
Yeah, I just shut it off because I'm not a WordPress or PHP fan, and
And
let
I hazard a guess nobody or very few people on this stream are. But what struck me, out of all the drama, maybe the tidbits, is just the claim that 40% of the web still runs on WordPress,
okay.
which sets a bit of the framing, right? When we think about web performance on the web and the nature of it, like, certainly we have the new and the great, but there's a lot of people that are still operating on older legacy platforms. In fact, it might be the majority of the web is still on these platforms.
I
So
think so.
yeah, so very interesting perspective. And I really gained that perspective when I was CEO at rebel.com. So I was CEO there for 10 years. And they're a domain registrar web host here in Canada, large by Canadian standards, small by global standards,
Okay.
but really, hundreds of thousands of customers, millions of domains up and running. So seeing that kind of operation at scale, and by and large, our customer base were the people that were the do-it-yourself kind of people that were building and setting up websites and email and technical infrastructure, um, but they weren't professionals in this industry. But we serviced a lot of them and tried to help them succeed. But in my time there, I did see a lot of the problems that this audience stumbles over, and certainly web hosts and service providers try and fill some of these voids. But it's a very difficult challenge to solve all of those problems at that level. And my time at Rebel, I got to see a lot of that. I also serve on the board of CIRA, which is the .ca registry. So if you buy a
Okay.
.ca domain name, they're the operator for the top level DNS for the CCTLD. So I've been serving with them 11 years now. So I get to see the internet from like the DNS perspective, from CIRA's perspective, and they too have the mission of getting everyone online and having access to website and email and these kinds of services. So I get to see a lot from that perspective too. And when I left, when I left Rebel, it was with a real itch, and this leads me to Onic. It was with a real itch to say, um, at, at at Rebel, we operated an e-commerce website. That's how we serviced our customers. So we got to ride the wave in the mid 2010s of going from like, back end led development all the way through to like React and front end led development.
Yeah.
And we were building an e-commerce site and we were optimizing it and we were constantly trying to evolve and keep up on those fronts, and performance was key. But then at the exact same time, we were serving customers who were using WordPress and other hosting platforms, and they were trying to get their sites up and running. So it was a real interesting position to be in from a web performance perspective, to kind of see these two audiences play. And I couldn't help but say that there's big gaps here. The difference between how a professional web e-commerce team operates and builds websites is just so dramatically different from how a do-it-yourselfer or small independent agency would go about um, building building a website. So
From
I was
from from your experience, it sounds like, especially since you worked with hosted, looking at the theory that a lot of the web is just e-commerce, because when people talk of complex application, I keep hearing e-commerce, 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 and I expect there to be more than just
no,
e-commerce.
there's so much more than that. I mean,
But they
broadly
look like
speaking,
the more like maybe the ones with serious business, or the ones with like majority of the say,
yeah,
besides just hobby websites and projects.
yeah, 100%. Like there's a full spectrum. Certainly, there's hobby project. Certainly, there's full blown e-commerce website, and e-commerce is the adopter, like probably the first and most vigilant adopter of web performance, right? Because there's such a direct connection to conversion rates,
Okay, yeah,
and revenue, that e-commerce is the obvious one. But there's plenty of organizations that deliver a lot of value through their website, be it uh, marketing material or brochures, or learning about products and services, or learning about the business, all the way through to like training websites where they deliver training and certifications through the web. Um, there's websites that are full blown web apps. Like we're all using web apps these days. Like the line between applications and web applications has blurred so much. So there's certainly more um, more to the web than just e-commerce. Although e-commerce is like kind of the
yeah,
bleeding edge of this stuff. I guess it's fair to say with Onic, I'm looking at saying, well, what about the rest of the web? Where are they on quality and performance and website health? And what can we do? What can we do for them? And it really brings this juxtaposition, right? Because when you're on the bleeding edge of this stuff, you're talking about the latest Chrome release, and
yeah,
you're talking about the latest edge compute tools, and you're talking about the latest frameworks. But when you're talking about the other half of the web, you're talking about much more basic things like the quality of your hosting package, and do you use content delivery at all, and uh, have you optimized your platform at all for performance and reliability? Are you monitoring it in any way whatsoever? So it's just a totally different set of challenges, right, for those two audiences. um, So I wanted to kind of highlight that off the top here with my little preamble that, you know, we're talking about that the other half of the web.
And what so for the other half, like what kind of what category of businesses do they run? Uh, is it like blogs or are they more different categories?
Blogs, company websites, that are less around selling a product directly, but more around educating customer, consumer. An example I use a lot because I used to work in this space is associations. Associations build very large web properties to service their membership. They're not e-commerce per se, but generally membership costs money. So the value
Yeah.
that they deliver, you know, online and otherwise, through events, through streams, through web content, um, services their whole mission. So it's still critically important to the business, but it's not maybe selling, a book.
Okay. And when for this kind of audience or people, when we talk about web performance, I mean, for technical people, over the course of the stream, we've used terms like web vitals, lighthouse
Yeah.
scores, time to first byte. But for the less technical people, and from let's say you have their in mind and their perspective, how
Yeah.
would you frame what web performance is?
I come maybe from a bit of an old school background on this, maybe a DevOps IT kind of background. But
Okay.
when I look at performance, I don't just think about speed, although speed is part of it. I want to broaden that out to be a little bit more, at least for this audience, like they need to be worried about reliability, errors and timeouts, quality, updates, security, defacing websites. All of these are challenges that those organizations will face that will impact quality and performance. So I like to broaden it a little bit and say it's more than just Lighthouse. You've got to look at a broader set of quality metrics on the website. I think you'd be amazed to see how many websites I find that have like critical errors and timeout frequently. So like the the bar here is, so for some sites is really really low, and we're looking to get them, from a failing grade to a passable grade, uh,
Yeah.
by tackling some of those problems.
Yes. So what you're saying is, it includes things like the reliability of your servers, where you're serving your website from,
100%.
uh, and other factors like the security aspect of it.
Yeah, the quality of the code. Are you following accessibility standards and best practices? We're even starting to get into testing basic user journeys now, so doing some automated synthetic testing of user journeys, just to help these organizations ensure that the basics of their website are operational. Um, a developer would look at this and say, uh, you know, what's the CI/CD pipeline? What's the testing framework? What's your
Yeah.
software development lifecycle? And what are the multiple layers of monitoring and testing and quality and observability you'd have in place? And in reality, I think what I'm trying to highlight here is when you go talk to some of these non-technical organizations, none of that exists. They don't have that baseline uh, to lean on for their quality. So they can have all kinds of issues popping up, and they can be very unaware that there even is an issue at the moment, um, because their workflow looks a lot more like I went to a host, I bought a platform, I edited the content, I added the plugin. Looks
Yeah.
good to me.
And I mean, from my perspective, I'm imagining most of this kind of non-technical people um, when they look at web performance, or rather when they go to host, they look for things like WordPress, Drupal, Webflow, and I think it's like the responsibility of this host to make
Yeah,
it secure. So from your perspective, who do you think the owners of this security or performance and
Oh,
reliability lies on?
good question. So uh, I'm reminded of an Amazon chart I used to look at all the time, which is called the shared responsibility model.
Okay.
And what they do is just outline, okay, when you use us, this is what we do and what we take care of, but this is your responsibility as a customer and things you have to take care of. And I think when you look at that model and you analyze a few platforms, you can see that the responsibilities shift. So let's say you self-host, you take on all the responsibility, right? Let's say you pick a hosting provider that gets you set up but doesn't really take care of content delivery. You're free to set that up on your own. WordPress as a platform doesn't really have optimization built in to the same degree as other platforms.
Yeah,
So
but I think
you take
the
that responsibility on yourself. But all the way over to, like, say, a Squarespace or a Shopify, where they take on the lion's share of the responsibility, right? So you kind of have the full spectrum of provider in this audience.
yeah, but I think if you use something like I don't know, maybe WP Engine, they have various plan, and I think
100% they do.
they
Yeah,
should give you that level of
you're giving
like
props to the
I'm
other
choosing a
half of the
side.
debate here. No, certainly. Like, speaking broadly, some hosts have content delivery built in as part of the package, and
Yeah,
performance optimization tools built in as part of the package. Um,
yeah,
and that can be part of the decision making process of the customer, right? Of whether they pay a little bit more to have that service baked into the platform, or they take it on themselves. I guess what I'm saying is, from research, I see that a lot are still taking it on themselves,
true.
right?
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on the host you are also using, and I think also one problem I'm guessing is the if you talk of less technical people, but should also apply to technical folk, is about awareness. How much do they know about this problems
Yeah,
that these are issues? Because um, we see have a lot of devs that when it comes to building reliable apps, they especially the newer generation, in my opinion, is more like, maybe you watch YouTube videos or you see content in conference from like Next.js or Vessel or
yeah,
Gatsby, and you have a frame of the world that everything revolves around that um framework or service provider,
yeah,
and you fail to question what other alternatives are there. And I think this is comes down to being aware or being more open-minded and knowing
yeah,
about those things.
yeah. Experience brings you there because, as I laid out off the top, over my career, I've seen just a ton of different platforms and evolutions over the years, and have worked with a ton, and probably have worked with less than half, but still have worked with a lot. And I think that, you know, performance isn't the only factor when an organization decides which platforms they're going to use. So at the end of the day, I try and take an agnostic point of view. Don't care which platform or provider you use, because that's your decision in multiple factors. Um, but we need to achieve good performance anyway, regardless of the platform you choose. I
Yeah,
think Vercel does an excellent job of, like, baking it in from the ground up and making performance like a first class citizen in their delivery, and that's great. But we have to recognize that, like, not every organization is going to be able to migrate to such a platform. The costs in doing so might be prohibitive. They might have a development team already in house that's and tons of hours invested in a different framework. So these challenges are real, and we can't just say, well, you have to adopt an entirely new platform, because those, for organizations this size, those costs are too great to bear
yeah,
every 2 or 3 years. So so I guess we have to work with the old stuff too, right? We have to try and make the old stuff better too if we're going to have a real impact
Mm,
on web
yeah,
performance.
yeah. I mean, education and awareness is important, and I try to do that with my YouTube
You're
channel.
doing a great job. I love it.
To be
And it's
to learn more, but also to share with the rest of the folks
yeah.
that, like me, wants to learn more and help them get there. But I think we still need more people, doing this and not doing it for
Yeah.
the sake of promoting a particular brand.
No,
Uh,
exactly. I
but
I I look at Europe and I'm envious because it appears to me like Europe is a bit more ahead of us in North America on community and awareness. I don't know if you feel the same, but it feels to me like a lot of the content creators are from Europe and a lot of the conferences and stuff are centered in Europe. So it feels to me like there's a bit of momentum there.
okay, I see it the other way around.
You do?
I mean, I think there are a lot of conferences in Europe, but in terms of content and all, I feel like they are mostly from Americans and or maybe a bit more Canadian. I think in the last
There's a
few
couple
months,
of us in Canada.
I think in the last
Ironically, I
1 month,
guess.
I've been seeing more Canadians for some reason. Like I talked to you from Canada. I think I had one other guest also, and a future one planned who is also in
Yeah.
Canada. So probably I might start seeing more Canadian and
Well,
American.
I'd love to see it. And like I want to run. I'm trying to build a business in this space. But at the end of the day, there's far more websites to fix than you or I or anyone who's currently doing it has
Of
time to
course.
fix. So,
Yeah.
this awareness problem is one we should all share in because rising tide floats all boats, and there's a lot of work to be done. Um,
Yeah. So let's get into some actual takeaways. So, given from your experience across over the years, what are the common mistakes you've seen,
yeah,
and what ways have you helped to solve it, or what ways can they solve it? So maybe, I mean, you don't need to have a list, but we can just go over it one after the other, or
yeah.
whatever comes to your mind.
So this is where I get to do
Your magic.
my magic. Also, when you invited me to come on, I went and I looked at your feed, and someone had posted to you, and you responded, "Not another web performance professional saying to pick a better host and add a CDN."
Oh
You
yeah.
know, so I called you and I said, "Hey man, I think that's exactly what I do." So hopefully I've laid enough groundwork as to why, the area of the market I'm focused on
Hmm.
is is not using these tools, is not using a web host that has
Wow.
performance integrated in, is using a vendor that is of lower quality and they don't even know it, and it's making it harder for them to achieve the stuff. So as much as I might take flack for it for saying it, I think it starts with evaluating your platform and your service providers. So it starts with monitoring those things and knowing if you're good. And as I said, I take an agnostic approach, so I don't have favorites. If you're achieving good quality and good performance, awesome. And if you're not, then you need to look to make a change. So I think a good evaluation of uh, your current state is where to start. That's something ONA can help with, but you've interviewed people from all kinds of different tool sets that can help on that front. And it likely starts with those big, broader questions about platform and vendors, because perhaps an upgrade in vendor will would really help. And then certainly, I just for the types of websites we're talking about and the size of organization, they could add a CDN for free or next to nothing and little to no effort.
Yeah,
Um,
I think there are a lot
so
of free CDNs out there.
there's no excuse really to add a CDN. What I will say, a big mistake I see on this front is that the CDN will be suboptimally configured. So either they don't have a CDN, or they're only using a CDN for static content. So a real problem I see specifically on the WordPress front is um, uh, WordPress treats all of its content as dynamic
Oh,
content because it could be dynamic. You might have a plugin or code that's generating dynamic content. So CDNs by default won't cache the actual content. They'll cache the assets and the static assets, but they won't cache the content. And then depending on the theme builder you choose, perhaps it's regenerating the scripts on the fly too and using custom names for the scripts. So you might put a CDN in place, but then only to realize that the CDN is doing very little. So I think adding a CDN in this context is twofold or maybe threefold. One, it's to add it. Two, it's to ensure the configuration of the platform is maximizing the use of it.
yeah.
And then there should be some monitoring and tools to help you ensure that that's actually the case. So I see that as a real big mistake. A lot of people are using Cloudflare but are not fully capitalizing on everything they would get even for free.
Oh, yeah. I think when you described it, that makes sense because Cloudflare would basically cache they don't cache HTMLs by default, but they will cache like CSS and JavaScript and maybe
And
images as well.
images and assets, right?
Yeah.
So it's not hard to configure Cloudflare to do content as well. So your actual document and and there's a number of plugins you can use for WordPress that will set it up properly too. So there's a nice harmony there,
Oh,
and then
okay.
suddenly, your WordPress site is 100 times faster because you're relying on the CDN as opposed to your web host. And I've even seen it mask. Like you could have a mediocre web host, and when the CDN's done properly, your performance numbers go through the roof because ultimately you're not relying on the web host for nearly as much.
Yeah.
You're not
If you have a lot of static or infrequently changing um, content, so a lot of people use WordPress for blogs, and most blogs are like mostly
corporate
static.
content, company content, right? A,
So I think they'll benefit a lot from that.
a secondary benefit is if you're using an inexpensive hosting package. I don't dare call it cheap, inexpensive hosting package. You might be resource constrained, right? So if all of your content is being reproduced on every request by the server, that's a lot of load on the server. If you can offload that to the CDN, you'll consume fewer resources, leaving more server resources for the things that do need to be computed.
Yeah.
Like if you have like a user panel where people log in and stuff like that. So it's a much better balance of your resources at the same time. So that needs to be done. And unfortunately, I don't know, you built a CDN or a
Yeah.
reverse proxy at least. You know how hard these things are. And maybe that's an area for the whole industry to improve is, I think that setup needs to be easier to make more optimal.
Yeah, but I think so. The when I try to do my own CDN or customize reverse proxy, it's more like looking at it from serving a specific purpose. Because I think one reason why the CDN fails to fit for everyone so perfectly is because they solve a very generic problem, and there's no one kind of um, settings to make it work for all,
And
which
you need,
is
yeah,
which is why you see, it's different from when you have a host like, let's say you use WordPress hosting and a CDN versus if you use Vessel. Vessel, they focus a lot on Next.js. So in that way, they optimize everything they can to make sure that if you
yeah,
use us to host your Next.js app, we become the fastest. So that way, when you are focused on a single market, you already have everything optimized.
you
But when
get
you
that
have a
advantage. Yeah,
yeah, when you have a very generic CDN, you can't just tweak the knob for everyone because different settings for different kind of users. And when I look at this
I
from that,
totally agree.
yeah, when I look at it from building my own CDN, and I'm not trying to have the same kind of POPs like Cloudflare or Fastly, it's more like I'm this kind of small business and I want to
Right.
optimize specifically for my use case. and I think that is where you get a lot more advantages. But like from the CDN part, they can't just give you. They have some sensible default, but you still have to do a lot of tweaking to make it work quite well for you. And
A
you
hundred
know,
percent. And it gets complex fast because you do need to understand the use case,
yeah,
right? In order to optimize the CDN. And then you could break things too by over optimizing on a CDN, right?
yeah,
Cache
true,
invalidation becomes a problem. When the content is dynamic from the server and it's not properly configured for the users, they're going to see incorrect content or stale content. So it's important to really understand that. But that's the biggest unlock that I see for the market that we're aiming to serve.
yeah. I think you also said something about not calling them cheap hosts. I call them cheap hosts because sometimes I see people. I'm on Reddit. I also started a web hosting, but I shut it down because I also try to look for a specific small market, and they are very hard to reach. But I'm in some of these Reddit forums, and I see a lot of complaints on things like some very unfamiliar web posts. People hosting on $2 per month, and like how you have to pay for resources, and you have shared resources, but sometimes they say maybe they can only serve like 5,000 traffic per month or 100 traffics, 100 requests per minute, kind of. And we
It's
look at
exactly it.
their setup, and it's very bad. And they are also using some shared hosts that have a poor service. So if you look for a cheap service, you get a cheap quality. So if you want something proper, you can go a bit higher, but it also depends
It
on
doesn't
which
even
player.
necessarily fix the problem, right? Because I mean, I was in that industry a long time, so
I
I
mean,
I would what
it
I would
doesn't.
say, hopefully in a friendly, positive manner to these hosts,
Yeah,
is generally those inexpensive packages are for really small sites with that have a low criticality,
yeah,
right? And that's what they're there for. And the problem becomes when an organization has a very valuable web property but can't see the need to invest more into their infrastructure, because why would they? X and Y companies offering me enough for $2, and when I click on it, it works, right? So we're back to that education and awareness, but
mm.
that I guarantee you that web host markets itself as fast, right?
When you say fast, what do you mean? Like fast to serve the?
Like the servers are fast and you have everything you need and it'll perform. But but I guess we know as professionals that there's nuance there and they're not all created equal. But
True.
when you're a consumer and you're looking around, like that's a huge problem. Like why would you pay 10, 15 times more for hosting if the marketing material reads the same, and you don't have the technical background to understand maybe some of the differences, and worse, maybe you felt ripped off sometimes because you did buy the more expensive package, but you didn't
I mean,
see or feel a difference.
yeah. I mean, I think that is fine. But from the part I've seen that maybe I didn't communicate this better, was
Yeah.
the people that I see complaining mostly are people that are quite technical, I think, but they keep going from one bad host to the other. You because
Price
the
is a factor, right? Price is a factor. And
yeah, but it ends up burning them. The trick I've seen is, you get this host for $2 per month,
yeah.
and you think that you don't read in between the line in the contract. So what some of these hosts do is they also give you like 1 year, 2 year, 3 year contract that you have to pay. So maybe you pay that for like 1 year, then the next year you are automatically paying like
Yeah.
$25 per month. Or maybe I see complaint that, oh, my WordPress is down, and the customer support tells me it's my problem. How do I fix that?
100%. I see that a lot and I feel it. And I felt it for a decade too when I sold hosting. I was like, oh, like your challenge is you're in the inappropriate lane here. You shouldn't be
Yeah.
over here. You should be in more expensive. But that's a real challenge to convince somebody that they need to spend more on their infrastructure. Here, you and I are debating the difference of a few $100s a month, a few hundred, a few $1,000s a year. Imagine if you told that same person you need to re-platform, you need to rebuild your entire site in a new platform. Like that's a totally different level of scale of cost that
True.
they're not prepared to take on. So it's an interesting challenge, which is why I think CDN is a bit of the magic here, where
It,
quickly, inexpensively, you can have a vast improvement. It won't be perfect, but a vast improvement uh, along the
yeah.
way.
I think I agree with that. It doesn't solve our problem, but yes. What other phase do you see? I would have loved to point out that like it also comes to the framework you use. If you use
Yeah.
WordPress, if you use Next.js, if you're using Ruby on Rails. But I don't want to put words in your mouth, and let's see,
Yeah, I
what
have
you.
a way of describing it. I have a way of describing it. Again, I'm trying to be friends to all, right? But um, because
You like to
performance
be
isn't
in
the
between.
only consideration, is what. So you got to balance all of these things from a business perspective.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, I would tell somebody if you use Squarespace out of the box, you're going to get really good performance out of the box.
Oh
You
yeah.
have to work to break Squarespace. I'd say the same thing, a similar thing about Shopify. Now, I know that some of our audience might say, hey, but I spent a lot of time optimizing Shopify and I can get way better. And that's true. But when you compare Shopify out of the box to like $2 a month hosted WooCommerce, Shopify starts you in a way better
I agree. If
configuration.
if you use their built-in or default shop, but if you build a custom store, I think
Yeah.
because you control some custom things, you still can
You
make
take
mistakes.
on some of the responsibility, but then you introduce the opportunity for mistakes,
Uh,
right? So Shopify, you start off in a really good spot. You could get better, you could get worse. I think the challenge with WordPress and WooCommerce in general is you start off poor, but it's totally possible to make it great. So, but you got to put the work in. So that's how I look at
uh,
uh,
and
those platforms.
I think the problem also comes down to what we said before. Also, it's like, WordPress is very generic. You can do blog, e-commerce, whatever with it.
Yeah,
Shopify focuses on delivering e-commerce, so they've tweaked everything possible to make you get a very fast e-commerce site.
100%. And we were talking about Webflow too. Like Webflow's got a CDN out of the box,
Yeah.
right? So like, okay, you use Webflow, you're going to have a great experience. But how people kind of can break Webflow is it's Webflow makes it really easy to do animations. And
Uh,
so the non-technical person gets enamored a little bit with animations, and then suddenly, it's actually poor design decisions from a performance perspective and maybe even a full UX perspective, but they can do it, so they do. And
yeah.
then so you end up with these um, pages which are just really, really heavily animated, which I don't know what you feel like, but I too much of that, it gets annoying to me regardless of the performance metrics, but it has an impact on performance too.
Probably if you don't have animated landing pages, you are not a modern company.
Yeah, exactly. But it's you have to use it tastefully, and you have to do it with performance in mind, and that's a boundary that that many less professional, less experienced developers will just shatter. They'll do all that kind of stuff, and maybe overdo it or use it in unnecessary places. And I argue that a site should just be fast first,
Yeah.
animated second. Another one I see a lot is the company will spend a lot of time on videos and marketing material, and then they'll post the videos in the landing pages in a way that just really impacts performance. Two common mistakes: you put a YouTube video right in your largest contentful paint, first contentful paint
Yeah.
window, especially when the user is not expecting it, right? If I click on your videos page and expect to see a video, I will wait for the load. But if I'm going to learn about your product and the first thing I'm hit with is is a slow loading video from a slow loading plugin, it's hard. Or sometimes people will put all their videos on that page,
Yeah.
right, and not set them to lazy load. So suddenly you've got all of this work happening to get the videos up there. So, very common mistake. A little restraint goes a long way. Um, Also, there's techniques to use thumbnails and facading so that you can delay. You could still have the visual element of a video without, all of the initial loading,
And you know why they don't notice that that is a problem?
because it's cached on their machine.
That's one, but
Yeah,
also, you get this video, you do it on your machine, and you are on, let's say, 1 gigabyte per second
100%.
bandwidth, and it looks so fast, but then you forgot that your
Yeah.
users are maybe loading from 5 megabyte per second.
It's exactly it. So I see, very as I said, for your audience, this is basic stuff, very simple stuff. Lighthouse picks this up in a synthetic test, or any of the rum tools you've spoken to will pick this up. Um, so it's easy to spot. Anyone on this channel knows how to fix it, but it's still a very prevalent mistake.
I wouldn't say anyone. I think we're all mixed here. I think people are also coming to learn about, like, you know, today you're talking about web performance from the beginner's perspective. So some
Well,
people might be curious to also
well,
see.
maybe, but also know there's other people on this channel who could help you, right? Like,
Yeah,
these aren't the avant-garde problems of the technology, but they're problems nonetheless.
true.
Yeah. I thought maybe one thing I'd share, Peter, is, Onyx new and we were just getting started. I I I know this is a problem of the past, and web performance and reliability was a big problem, but I was kind of questioning whether it was still a problem. So we did a bit of a research project where we found a few thousand websites, for businesses that are in Canada, that we know they care about their web property, right? They're doing active marketing, active social media, they're directing traffic to their website currently. So they're not old, not stale, live current websites. But generally, they're not e commerce websites either, right? So they kind of live in that world where they're a business or organization website serving a purpose, but not fully optimized like e commerce. And of those 1,000 sites, it literally breaks down into four quadrants. 25% of those sites are great. I've got
Okay.
nothing to add, clearly built by someone that knew what they're doing. Clearly, there's some kind of operational system in place to keep the website happy, healthy, fast, performant, all of those things. 25% have problems that a professional would know how to fix within a day, right? You can go and look at the site and you're like, okay, there's something that's suboptimal. There's something that's suboptimal. There's a technique to address that. So there's an opportunity to be a little bit better. I would not say that these sites are bad, but there's an opportunity immediately available, an easy opportunity to fix. 25% start to have bigger problems. Like, these are things that we would consider errors, like definitely should be fixed right away. And the last 25%, somebody needs to be fired. Like, this is not good. This is an F or a D minus at best.
I,
And
I
and
had
this is
anxiety before you mentioned the last quarter.
yeah, because there's just too much wrong, right? Like, there's just too much wrong, that clearly whatever they've set up is has too much work to do. They need to find a new partner or new supplier, or invest some time and effort into this if their website's important to them, because it's just a very poor failing grade. So
Or
that
hire
kind of
me.
What's that? Sorry.
Or they could hire me. I can help them fix it.
Yeah. And so this is where I highlight, like, okay, like, I don't think if you went to any of those business owners and showed them what was up, that they would be happy or accepting of that outcome, right? They would
Yeah.
be upset or disappointed, that's how a professional would grade what's happening here, and that there'd be so much opportunity to improve before them. But our challenge is, okay, well, one, we need to help people learn that there is a problem and it should be better. And then two, we got to pair them up with the right partner to help them make that happen.
Yeah. So, do you have any like, I know you run your own business, so probably you've also seen like real, real, real world stories about this. Maybe you have an example to show us about, how you help your customers shift from from a problem to a
Yeah,
solution.
yeah, sure. I have one funny story from the early days where
Oh, I talking of story, I think you mentioned one in your during your time with React, if
during
you
my time
remember.
with React, oh, I don't know which one you're referring to.
I think something about maybe you built the web host dashboard with React and you guys had to do some trade-off on performance and
I'm not sure of that one.
okay,
The one I was thinking of was a
okay,
friend of mine. I started to monitor their site. They're a small business. They use their website for promotion. They're driving a lot of traffic to their website to hopefully gain leads. And when I was first building the product, I set up all the monitoring and alerts, and I was watching their site and using it as a test. But I was still very uh, I was still questioning our product. Anytime I saw a problem in a site, I thought it was a problem with our product's analysis of the site. And
okay.
a Friday night, 4 p.m., I get an email saying that their website is down, and I instantly think, "Oh, my software is broken again. Our product's broken. Got to go fix it." Surely their website wouldn't be down, right? Like, that's not a modern web problem. And so I let it go all weekend. Uh, and when I finally got up on Monday morning and I started to look through my code, I realized that, oh my God, it's not our code. Our test was right. Their website is down. And when I reached out to them, they had no idea. Absolutely no idea. And they're an interesting scenario because they hired a web developer to do this work for them. And they thought that the web developer was actively monitoring their website for them.
No,
And it turns out that they weren't. So the website is down for 3 days.
no one knows.
No one knows. And so this isn't performance per se, it's more reliability, sure. But like any kind of monitoring at all would have picked up that there's a really severe problem,
Yeah,
right? And it doesn't take a lot of aptitude to fix the problem, really. It just takes knowledge that there is a problem and we should hurry up and fix it. So that was a really interesting one in the early days.
but I think, like you said, it's not performance related, but I think it's still related to performance because
It is, yeah,
somehow I also think that performance is, it's a very generic word when we talk of web performance. It could be what the user sees in the browser. It could be the time it takes to process or approve an order.
yeah,
It could, like there are different layers of that, and at the end I summarize it or look at it as, being able to make your users happy. So if I come to your website and I can't reach it because it's down, that's also performance.
yeah.
So
So,
but
so it just goes to show you, though, the human element of the business thought that they were covered, and the web developer thought that they had completed their job and handed off responsibility.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, nobody was watching, and there was a big impact to reputation and lost money because an error happened. Um, and that immediately costs the business to lose trust in their developer, right?
Yeah.
Because there's an accountability function there where you're like, suddenly someone else has figured out that there's a problem, and the company feels bad about it. They don't like it. It's not a good feeling to let a customer down. Um, so now they're starting to look at, well, why did that happen and whose responsibility is this? And they thought that they had delegated that responsibility to someone else, but it turns out they hadn't. So, that's a real challenge. I have another one which I'll show you, which is interesting. Perhaps I'll share my screen for this one.
Okay. While you share your screen, do you think the other problem? I don't think usual monitoring tools like maybe Onic or Web Page Test and the others, I don't think they monitor for this kind of uptime, right? I think you
Uh,
use a typical uptime monitoring tool.
Yeah, Onic does, because Onic is a little bit more. It's a little less focused on, like we said, like bleeding edge performance, and it's a little
Ah,
more
okay.
focused on like what are the generic monitoring any old customer should have in place to
Okay.
ensure quality. So maybe I'll walk you through this example because it'll highlight that.
All right.
Um, but this is a fun example because this is an e-commerce business. E-commerce is not their primary mode of selling, but they do a considerable amount of business through their website selling directly online. And I did a little screen share of the ONIC report. Does that come up okay?
Yeah, it does, but I mean the most of the texts are a bit little, so
Yeah, okay. I don't think you need to read the text. I can walk you through it, but this is an example of an ONIC report, and it's a shared screen because I had to protect protect the customer. So I've
yeah,
redacted their name. But if you look through this customer, they are paying an e-commerce tool to run their entire e-commerce platform, and it's not an insignificant amount of money. It's a lot of money.
okay.
So you would expect top-notch performance, and that's exactly what this customer expects. But when we turned ONIC on to analyze and we started to look at uptime, downtime, which I hope is kind of on your screen there now,
Yeah,
what you'll see is this chart should have no red on it, right? And there's a lot of downtime and failed requests from a platform that they're spending a lot of money with to host their site. So this is kind of the first signal that ONIC found that there's a bit of a problem here. And then when we look at the response time, or analogous to time to first byte in a web core web vitals perspective, they never have fast response times, but they often have slow response times. And when we start to look at this in a little more detail, what we notice is that it's actually during business hours.
also it's slow during business hours when there's more traffic.
Right. But then we analyzed their traffic and realized, well, they don't really have a significant enough spike to like impact a server. So really, this platform, other customers are having a lot of traffic, and that's slowing down the platform, which is causing some of these errors.
Yeah.
Right. So then we keep going in and analyzing. So these are your lighthouse scores across a variety of pages, multiple tests per day. And we're seeing a very broad range in lighthouse scores. So we show that the worst scoring pages are down here, and the best scoring pages, like, meet a basic benchmark, but there's a wide range of samples coming in. So we wouldn't necessarily pick this up if we did a spot check, because the spot check might show up bad. And then what do? You refresh it and it shows up good, and you're like, okay, it's good. But when you run multiple lighthouse reports, you start to see the pattern
Yeah.
that there's actually a wide variety amongst pages, and also amongst time of day and request. We go in and break down some of the core web vitals a little bit to maybe give an indication as to what is breaking down on the performance score. We already know response time is a factor, uptime's a factor, but now we could see that largest contentful paint is also a factor. So these are the kind of summaries that we pull together. Now, for this particular customer, what we aim to do and are doing now is reach out directly to their vendor and help them work with that vendor and say, look, we need to remediate some of these problems. You have to help us do it. If it's something that's our responsibility and our job to fix, you need to help us. But if it's your responsibility and your job to fix, you better get on it.
I like the
Right.
last sentence.
Um, and because this, as I said, it's not an insignificant amount of money. It's definitely a lot more than $2 a month. Right.
Yeah.
But
But
it
even
just,
for $2 per month, I mean, if you're going to do something, you do it right, you know.
yeah. So this customer now has the challenge of thinking, do they continue with this vendor? Can this vendor help them remediate some of these problems? Or is it time to open up the discussion around which platform are we going to migrate to, because this is an unacceptable level of performance?
And how do you do it? So for your customers, do you also try to share some, to do some kind of education around web performance so that they know what to look out for? Or do they already come to you with some understanding of web performance?
No, generally, well, it's been interesting. So our journey started with these small businesses that we were talking about, where generally they're non-technical, and we have to introduce to them the concept of web performance and show them enough data and report in a scorecard that kind of shows them where they're at on, where they are. We use emojis to do that. You're either a siren emoji because it's bad, or you're a rocket ship because it's fantastic. But just very simple kind of communication to help them understand where they're at. But generally, when we dive into these reports, you could start to see, okay, where some of the problems lie. So we aim to give whomever their team is, whether it's internal team, an agency, an independent developer, or a service provider, we start with just giving them the knowledge about performance is poor, and this is the area that we see poor performance or quality. And that might be enough for you to go fix it. And if it is, go ahead. If it's
Mm.
not, we have a little bit of training we can do and a few, I call them playbooks that we've developed over time, where it's like, hey, why don't you try a couple of these things? We spoke about CDNs earlier. That's likely part of the playbook, where they can, over the course of a week or two, just get some improvements quickly. And then every once in a while, our customers come back and say, uh, you know what, like, this isn't going to work. Training isn't going to work, or us just on our own isn't going to work. Can you fix it? And lately, what we've been trying to do is then introduce them to a partner. If they're a big company and big needs, we might try and introduce them to an agency. If they're a small company with small needs, we might try and introduce them to an independent. But say, okay, Onic Onic has shown you the problem. Onic should be the monitoring tool, but ultimately you need to upgrade your service providers to achieve a higher quality. And here's an expert who can help.
Yeah, I think that's quite nice. And I think you are the first one I know doing approaching it from the serving a different market. Most I know are like the typical web performance, and when I talk of web performance, it's more like from the web browser. So people like web page tests, pingdom, running some. I mean, pingdom is also a bit generic, uh, but like speed curve, so they look at it more from the core web vitals and the lighthouse part, and
Yeah.
things you can plug in. And this is more like for less technical people, like also showing like a report. So I think there are different markets or categories in the market to focus on. And
100%. And if you were to look at this as a journey, we're talking about the companies that are doing very little and are impacted by poor performance and quality today. They have to start a journey.
so
That
from
journey, right? That journey likely starts with something simple that helps them start to learn and start to build awareness and start to fix some problems, you can still go all the way to doing real user monitoring, right? Like that journey can go that far. Um, but but it should only get that far when you get the basics in place,
Yeah.
and then it comes time to say, okay, what what's next? We're now a good performer, but we want to be great, or we're a great performer and we want to be fantastic. You know, there's a place for all the tools in the chain that do that, and all the levels of experts along the way. Um, but it doesn't. You've got to kind of have the right tool for the job at the right time to walk some of these customers uh, down that journey.
Yeah. I think that's quite nice. And we've been speaking for a while now, so let's start trying to wrap this up a bit.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. So we just to summarize a bit what we talked about for those that missed it, or those that wants to have a bit of wrap up. I would say the key part we talked about relating to the issues and fixes were more like, you mentioned things like, on Webflow. So it's very easy to, put animations all over your Webflow website, and then that also degrades performance. And the key there is, when you want to put animations, use it judiciously, I would say,
Hmm.
and be careful with it. But also, I would say, like do some audits and measure before you add too much of that. Same goes with the videos you said. We talk about asset optimization, or maybe we hinted a bit. I don't know why.
Why
My,
did that happen?
I
How do I make that happen? Awesome.
think it's said it from my mic.
Uh,
So like we have also asset optimization. So if you use like videos or images, using like some modern compression or image format to make it lighter and easier to go over
even
the
the
wire.
even the correct size, like basic stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and also like use a CDN. It's one of the easiest hack you can use, but that depends on your stack. If you run WordPress, for example, then maybe you should also be much more diligent with configuring that.
Configuring caching. Yeah.
There are quite a lot of good ones, like Akamai. We've had a couple of folks from Akamai, on
Yeah.
the podcast. Fastly. Uh, so, try that out. Also about your poor hosting. So the issue might either be from your hosting platform or you not properly utilizing your hosting platform. And you know we didn't get the chance to talk about a few other things. I wanted to mention how I look at it now in like web performance from different categories, from the talk I listened to from Tim Ferriske from Akamai. And like there are different dimensions of things that can help speed up. There are some modern
Oh,
standards around
interesting.
like early hints, early data, and like early data is more like zero RTT. Like some other things, maybe if you use something like WordPress, that could also improve the performance through predictive fetching, like speculation rules.
Yeah, speculation rules and
Yeah.
yeah,
And I also think, when we talk about the servers or the hosting platform, people should also start considering like distributed origin. Origin, because from the CDN perspective, they see your hosting platform as origin. So
yeah,
I think very few people do this, but it's important to have like it distributed, especially if you have a global audience. And many of those, I've spoken about in the past episodes, and I will still talk more about it in future episodes. So, if that is your thing, subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned. Maybe I will have Rob back again to give us more field insight into
I
what
hope
he's seeing
so.
with web performance. And maybe if you're a Webflow developer or WordPress, just leave a comment. Maybe we can do something with a lot of examples targeting your particular topic, because I think maybe Rob works a lot with WordPress and Webflow sites. But for my part, I see more like like JavaScript, like Next.js, Remix, React. The most from the other angle, so less experience from the WordPress or site builders.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So we could do something like that. Uh, any last things to add
Uh,
regarding the talk?
Huge thank you for the work you're doing to help build community, spread the word, raise awareness, raise education. I think it's a awesome job you're doing, Peter. As I said, I watched a number of your streams after we met. There's some fantastic content in there.
I
The one that's
appreciate
coming
that.
to mind right now, it was a few weeks ago. Is it Sia?
Oh
She,
yeah,
she walked through all the free tools you need to know. Excellent, excellent catalog.
yeah. That was also one of my favorite, and I do go back to watch some of these talks
Yeah.
again, and I need to try this tool. I need to try this stuff.
Yeah, she should know that she's influencing me, and I am going to be revisiting that talk because it's wonderful. But yeah, go back in the channel and watch some of the previous episodes because there's a lot of fantastic information in there. So, Peter, thank you very much for doing what you do.
Yeah, and where can people find you? And what would you like to plug in? Maybe your product or
You can come
yourself.
check us out at onic.io. We're really just getting started, so you can find me on LinkedIn, or you could send me an email or contact me through the website because we'd just love to chat. We're looking for partners and people to work with. We're looking to improve our tool. So if some of this stuff sounded interested to you and you just want to say hello, come say hello. We do mostly synthetic monitoring, so if we want to try the system out, we can try it out on a few sites too. So not a problem.
Yeah, awesome. So for my part, I will still be your lovely host. Feel free to catch me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I talk about web performance a lot more these days than I've been. My past life, I talked a lot about DevOps and CI/CD, and now suddenly I'm talking about web performance.
Yeah.
So uh, I'm on Twitter. I recently had some small experiment with building multi-page apps and making them fast. So if that's your thing, I had a little thing on Twitter that I shared, regarding that and how all those played along. Maybe I can show a bit of it if possible on the stream.
Let's
You
do it.
know,
I want
uh,
to see it.
let's see if yeah. So I had some, like I was trying out a couple of different modern patterns. A lot of people are used to seeing React and Next.js and saying, oh, it's fast, but we also know those are corporate from some web performance issues. And I was going back to to the roots of building regular multi-page apps, making use of the browser features. And one of the stuff that like I tried to show was how you can also have like instant web application.
Yeah,
you know
awesome.
you you can see how you may not notice that this is doing a full server refresh, because it has this transition that makes it look like a single page app, so makes it look very
So is
uh,
that view transitions and speculative loading?
yeah.
Yeah.
So it uses view transition, speculative loading. I'm not sure. So I enabled early hints on the CDM, but I think for that to happen, because I just launched the demo last night, so it takes a few usage to start predicting on Cloudflare, because Cloudflare doesn't allow you to do that.
Okay.
But you can see that with something that basic, you can get like 100 lighthouse scores, without doing so much
Yeah, the
effort.
platform
you
really,
know,
really helps you. A few of those tricks you used it for the browser really help you.
yeah. So no JavaScript, things looks quite nice. If you look at the loading performance here, you can see, it takes very less time to how much I think here, like, so
Yeah,
no render
amazing.
blocking, and it's a site with a lot of images. So you can, these are the things that I'm trying to also push for in with what I'm doing, that you
Awesome.
can do you can do like a fast website without having to use a lot of JavaScript. And there are a lot of browser native features this day that you can play with. But
Oh, that's really cool. Like Onic, the product itself is built in Next.js and React. So I get to see a lot of the stuff that you're playing with there through working on our
yeah,
product, and it's fascinating. It's and really cool, and making it a lot easier to do multi-page apps that are really quick.
yeah, that's what I'm happy for in the future. I mean, it needs, or some of this feature needs to be cross browser enabled. But I'm also looking ahead in the future what is possible,
Yeah,
and what we can do with things like that. But
yeah,
let's see how much I can spread the gospel.
yeah. Very, very cool.
All right, folks, thanks for hanging out with us. See you next week. And subscribe, check out Rob at onic.io. Find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Peter Mbanugo, or P.Mbanugo on wherever social you use. And see you next time. Bye bye.